Welcome to the All the Hats We Wear podcast. I'm your host, Scott Snow, life coach and productivity expert. This podcast is your support group for all things related to living your purpose. I believe that the secret to a joyful, productive, and fulfilling life is to identify the 15 to 20 roles we play, all the hats we wear, and then turn them into masterpieces. Today we have a special guest. Mari Ryan is here with us today, and you're really going to enjoy this episode. As CEO and founder of Advancing Wellness, Mari Ryan is a workplace well-being strategist, guiding organizations to create people-centric workplaces. During her career, she has worked with businesses of all sizes, from startups to global powerhouses such as Microsoft, Morgan Stanley, and Northrop Grumman. She brings a wealth of experience and expertise. Mari holds a bachelor degree from Lesley University, an MBA from Boston University, and a master's in health promotion from Nebraska Methodist College. She is a certified worksite wellness program consultant and is a certified facilitator in a number of evidence-based behavior change programs. Mari is the author of the award-winning book, The Thriving Hive: How People-Centric Workplaces Ignite Engagement and Fuel Results. It's available on Amazon. Please welcome Mari Ryan.
Thanks, Scott. I'm delighted to be here with you today.
Well, I got a bunch of questions. I've been reading your book. It's wonderful. And the book is called The Thriving Hive: How People-Centric Workplaces Ignite Engagement and Fuel Results. And that's, oh, there it is. And it's available on Amazon in audio and the physical form.
And ebook as well, for those who like to prefer to an ebook rather than a real book.
Excellent. Well, would you start by telling us a bit about your company, Advancing Wellness?
Sure. I founded Advancing Wellness about 15 years ago with the goal of working with businesses to create healthier workplaces. We really want to be able to create environments in the workplace where people will thrive. And that's the work I've been doing for 15 years.
And this certainly is unprecedented times with the pandemic. What have you found CEOs and upper management and leadership, what have they learned, in your opinion, about employees given this pandemic?
Well, I think the pandemic has reinforced for us the notion that businesses can't achieve their business objectives without their people. It's just, there's no two ways about it. You just can't get there without your people. And that we often have to learn how to adapt quickly in some unprecedented situations such as this. And I think that in and of itself, just the fact that we have to be nimble, that we have to, be willing to look at things differently, to try things differently. I think that's been some of the real learnings that people have seen. I mean, we've seen industries transform in what felt like overnight, in
Right.
a short period of time. And I think that showed that they could throw away some of the perceived barriers that would have kept them from, innovating quickly. And I think that really has helped people really get more engaged in some cases, so for the people in the organization, for the employees, they've seen that there's this need to be creative and innovative and to embrace change in a way that they hadn't before.
I was reading an article about, I think it was a CEO that was setting aside time like every Friday for 20 minutes or whether, I think it was 20 minutes with Max. And that was a time for him to open up the floor and just say, what else is going on in your life? Now, how have you found, how are people handling that?
Well, I think that's a great example of leadership in a way that is really about caring for the people, right? So just asking that question, what's going on for you? Being able to take a moment and be compassionate and empathetic and listen to what it is that is going on for someone. Sometimes, we get into we got to do the work, we got to get it done, we got to get on to the next thing. when we stop and take time to make those connections. So one of the elements of well-being is connection. When we make those connections, it gives us a different perspective and really creates connections in very different ways.
Hmm. And it seems to me that in most cases, employees aren't going to take advantage of that opportunity to be able to say, well, my parent is, older and I'm taking care of her or him, and the kids are doing this. Do you find that people take advantage of it when they're given the opportunity, or are they, do they make sense with their requirements?
Well, I think if it's a safe environment, I think it's all about whether we're creating a safe environment for people to feel like they can be vulnerable. We all have some vulnerabilities in our lives and in who we are. And when I feel like I can talk about that and that it's safe and it's going to be received in a way that is appropriate and meaningful, then I think we're more willing to do that. If it's something that's, where the boss says, "Oh, stop complaining about kids and get back to work." That's not a safe environment. We're not going to feel good about that kind of an interaction. So I think it really depends.
Right. And people want to be engaged with their work. They want to be involved with something of purpose. Now, in your book, you talk about the dive hive versus the alive hive. So can you tell us a bit about that? Because that kind of factors into what we just discussed.
Well, when I created the story, so the book is written as a parable, and it is set in these two beehives. So I use the beehive as the metaphor for the system of the workplace. And what I was trying to really do there with the alive hive and the dive hive was to show the contrast of the ways in which we can create workplaces where we can motivate people, where we can make people feel that they're part of something bigger. You just mentioned this idea of purpose. And when people feel like they're connected to something that has a purpose and a meaning, they're more likely to be engaged with it and to really feel committed to it. And that's really the contrast. So it's kind of a little bit of this black and white kind of thing. And we know there's a lot more gray in real life, but it was really just meant to be able to show that we can create scenarios and situations where people can thrive, or we can create situations that diminish people's thriving and their well-being. And that's really what I was trying to do. And I think it's pretty obvious when I say to people, so where would you rather work? In the alive hive or the dive hive?
Right. And certainly not for Queen Corella of the dive hive.
Certainly not for Queen Corella. Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
She just cared about the numbers and the profits, right?
Well, exactly. But think about that, for businesses that, and there may be very many businesses that still only focus on the numbers, only focus on the profit. That's, you know, that's very singly focused in a way that may not care about the people with whom you are, for whom you are dependent to be able to create those profits and those numbers.
Your book was also reminding me of some of the lessons in the Blue Ocean Strategy book as well, with not even thinking of trying to have the most output or the most honey sold and all that sort of thing, but of having your own special way and being of service and really being focused on that customer really kind of sets you apart, that you don't really have competition if you're all on board with your purpose and pursuing your vision.
Exactly. You nailed it, Scott.
When you see a company that does it really well, like they really have everyone on board with a purpose, what are those companies doing?
Well, I think that they've created this vision of something that's bigger than themselves. They've created this vision of alignment across the organization where people feel like they're connected to that. And that type of connection really translates into purpose for the individual. So it's what gets them excited. It's what gives them the dopamine hit. It's what makes them feel like, hey, I'm doing something that really has some meaning in the world. And I think when that's firing on all engines, that's when you're going to see people are going to be engaged. That's when they're going to really care about the work that they do. And they're also going to feel cared for in the workplace so that they're not constantly feeling stressed or burnt out or anxious, so that they really feel like, hey, I made a difference in somebody's life, or in some way I've made a difference in what I did today.
So besides an employee learning the vision statement or the mission statement of the company, they need to know more about the results of their work, the customers, and the value that they get.
Well, absolutely. So, I could be making widgets, right? And as long as, I'm just focused on what the widget is that I'm making, but if I know how that widget is used in some meaningful way in people's lives, that widget could be the little thing that goes into the medical device that is used to save people's lives and so how that little piece fits with the bigger picture is really important, because then my work has meaning. There's a classic story about I think it was John Kennedy visiting the what's, I guess it's now called the Kennedy Space Center, but visiting a NASA place, and had a conversation with the janitor, and the janitor didn't respond. What do I do here? I sweep floors. He said, no, I'm part of putting the man on the moon. So
Hmm.
it's, how do you connect the little piece of what you do to the bigger piece of the contribution that the organization is making? And I think that's when you create the culture in an organization that does that. I mean, it's more than just, the vision statement on the wall or on the printed card or, on the website. It's how that gets translated into the culture in the workplace.
Hmm. Important. You also give workshops on helping a company come up with the vision, a short-term and long-term vision for their company. So what would be some of the objectives, or what goes on in a workshop like that?
Well, the vision that we're creating is specific to, it's not just the corporate vision, it's specific to well-being in the workplace. And by doing that, what we're really doing is we look to the vision and mission and purpose of the organization, and we use that to craft this particular vision about how the organization is going to create a workplace where people thrive. And we use that as a way to really guide, what are the pieces around what does it mean to be cared for in this workplace? And the way we do that is we have this really fun exercise that we do it's called Common Ground. And with that exercise, what we do is have everyone contribute their ideas. And then we look through all of those ideas and we pull out the common words and the common themes that come from that. And in a short period of time, we evolve that through to a few keywords and key themes. And before you know it, we have vision and mission statements. It's really a fun exercise.
That's great. What's your process for establishing an employee wellness program at a company?
Well, when we think about an employee wellness program, it is one element of creating this culture of caring in the workplace. And first off, we have to understand what the interests of the employees are, because we always want to do things first that are of interest to the employees. If we just said, well, you whole bunch of people there, you got diabetes, or you're overweight, or you're not getting enough exercise and you need to eat better. If we just did these prescriptive things, we fundamentally as adults, we pretty much all know what we need to do to stay healthy. But if we just do it in a prescriptive way, trying to fix people, then it's not going to be very successful. So instead, what we typically do is, from some data gathering elements of assessments and focus groups, we understand what people want to do. And then we start with that. And by doing that, then we are really going towards the things that people are going to be motivated to do, and they'll be interested to take part in.
Hmm. For some reason, I'm thinking of this question here, and it might be off track a bit, but I'm thinking, why is it the corporation's job to help the employee so deeply with their own self-development? Like, you would think a person is their own person. Is that part of what a corporation is?
Well, that's an interesting question. And I love that you asked that question, because many times we think about this from the perspective of purely a financial investment. When I first started in this business 15 years ago, a lot of the work that wellness programs were focused on, and we called them wellness programs then, not necessarily well-being, the programs were focused around reducing healthcare costs. So we live in a model in the United States where employers are very heavily invested in the healthcare costs of their employees. It can be one of their largest expenses in their organization. And so the concept was that if we get people to be healthier, then they will spend less on healthcare, and that will save us money. So it was purely financially driven,
Right.
and not driven from the perspective of, if we care about people and if they are healthy, they're going to be more productive, they're going to be more engaged, and then maybe our business results and our profit will just be an outcome of that. So it's kind of an interesting, you could take the very financial viewpoint of it and say employers are invested in this because they're paying so much money for it. Or you could take the more caring view that says, if we care for people, they're going to like what they do, and they're going to want to be here, and they're going to be good at what they do.
Right. What about, the big issue now with, especially with the pandemic, is a work-life balance, and where are the boundaries around the beginning of the day, and how is that factored into a well-being program for a company?
Well, it's part of the culture to a certain extent. We live at work and we work, at where our life is. So the boundaries have completely disappeared in some cases.
Right.
And it's caused, in some cases, it's been detrimental, I would say, to people's well-being. They may have traded a commute now, they traded off the commute, which was one form of where they were spending their time, for now spending more time sitting in front of screens and feeling tethered to their computers. Right. So I'd say in some ways, we got to look at this from the cultural perspective in the workplace. With one of my clients last year, they were recognizing that people were feeling stressed. It was summertime, middle of the pandemic. People had no place to go, so they weren't taking vacations. So they literally weren't using their vacation time. Right. And that was a measure that they could look at and say, hey, people aren't taking any vacation here. But what they also recognized was that people are going to get burnt out if they don't stop and take time off. So they actually instituted some wellness days where employees were required to take one Friday, and it had to be a Friday because they wanted people to have long weekends. And they encouraged them to take that day off, and they could choose, you had to work it out with your supervisor and everything, and, work which day off you were going to take so that business still functioned. But they really recognized this concern about people stopping, taking time, stepping away from the old step away from the computer type of thing. So it's something we have to learn in many ways. This is a personal skill, I think, that we have to learn. We have to learn to balance, when we are going to set some boundaries. You have a certain time of day when you're going to stop. You don't accept meetings before, a certain start time, during the day. And I think this is where culture, again, really can come into play. I had another client for whom they had some pretty standard practices around setting meeting times, and people would have meetings at lunch, from 12 to 1, let's say. And what ended up happening is people would end up being in meetings for hours and hours and hours with no breaks. So they finally instituted, and again, this is adopting some more healthy behavior, is to not have meetings between 12 and 1 p.m. And especially now with people working from home, where kids might be doing school from home, they might be taking breaks, and it's a time for family to be able to reconnect. So there are some practices that the organization can do, but we also need to encourage people to set some boundaries themselves.
That's great. From reading a lot of articles about the startups and their approach to well-being programs, it seemed almost that it was very extrinsic, superficial. Ping pong tables and rope course and free beer on Friday and softball team. Does it seem that now it's a little bit more like it? It almost seems that that's not attracting young workers, not young professionals. They want that purpose and that meaning and a little bit more depth than just we're going to have a softball team. Have you found that, or is that just the impression that I've gotten?
Well, I think your impression is probably valid. And I think a lot of that is now different given the pandemic and the fact that we have so many more people that are working in a distributed model. I think that people look at those kinds of benefits or amenities and say, gee, those are have to have kinds of things. But I think in the long run, while those are nice to haves, that what we really have to be sure that we've got at the foundation of things is those things that are going to be of interest to the employees. So it goes back to my earlier comments about what do the employees want? If the employees want beer on Fridays, why not? If they want ping pong tables, why not? But in the long run, what are the things that are going to motivate them? And you use the term extrinsic, and that's an important element, because what drives human behavior is intrinsic motivation, something that I want for the purpose of, for my reason to do it, not the extrinsic things, such as being paid to do things or, just from an external motivation perspective. So I think we have to really focus on understanding from our employees, what are those things that intrinsically motivate them? And I think you're right, purpose, meaning, autonomy, all of those things are what people really are interested in.
And for people to be able to see a path for them to better themselves in the company, right? With goal setting and mentoring.
Absolutely. Learning, development, growth, knowing you've got a career path is also very, very important. That goes back to the idea of purpose. When we think about purpose at the individual level, not necessarily the organizational level, we've got to know what it is that's getting me out of bed every day, and how's that motivating me, and how's that tied to my purpose and my values. And when we can focus on that, then we really are sure that we can have, far better ability to be able to engage those employees and help them feel like they're doing something that has meaning.
Does an employee's personal goals and values have to be aligned with the corporation's?
Not always. I would think that if they were completely opposite, that it might be problematic. I mean, there's many people who, are very, very personally motivated by some of their avocations and hobbies. So they go to work and they do their job and they do it very well. And then they go home and they do what they really love. And so for those people, have at it, enjoy it. If it brings you joy in your life, do it. And it doesn't necessarily mean that they're not engaged in their work. It just may mean that they've got some, personal passion thing that brings them great excitement, and they find a way to make that work in their lives.
And that reinforces their creativity as well, right?
Oh, absolutely. Sure. When somebody's got these passionate things that they do in their life, and I see this all the time with friends, I've like people who are bicyclists is what comes to mind. I have a number of people in my life who are really avid bicyclists, and they go out and they'll ride 60 miles on a Sunday.
Mm.
And they're coming back so full of energy and so excited about what they've done. Well, that translates into the work that they're doing. I mean, it doesn't mean that their passion for cycling doesn't have anything to do with their work. It does, because it helps them bring that energy that they're going to have and that enthusiasm that they've got for their life into their job. So I think there can be alignments.
I know that one service that your company offers is the assessment, going in and finding out what, how does it stand right now with the employees. So what is your process and your approach for gathering the qualitative and the quantitative data for a company?
Yeah, we have a fairly detailed process that we use when we're engaging with an organization to help them really document their current state. Where are they today? And we use that as the basis for which we then design that workplace of the future, that desired state in which they want to be able to show that they're caring for their people. We use, as you said, qualitative and quantitative data gathering techniques. We have focus groups and interviews that we do. We have surveys that we do to get the information from the majority of the workforce and look at existing data that may exist in the workplace. And all of that comes together to be able to create that picture of the current state.
That's great. Well, this has been a great pleasure, Mari. I think you got all the questions correct.
Oh boy,
Yeah.
I was worried because I didn't even know what the questions were going to be. So
Well,
I'm glad I got them correct.
Now, my final question, Mari, is what is one thing our listeners can do to be more purposeful in their life?
Oh, that's such a great question, Scott. What they can do is to really practice good self-care. We've learned so much in the pandemic, but we've learned most importantly that there is nothing more important than our health. And if we don't take care of ourselves, then we can't be there for anyone else. We can't even be there for ourselves, much less anybody else, whether that's our family, our friends, our employer, whoever it may be. So just work at taking care of yourself. We all know what it means to live a healthy life. So let's just do that.
That's great. Thank you so much for being on the show.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for all your great questions. And I always love spending time with you. Thanks, Scott.
For more information on Mari Ryan and her company, Advancing Wellness, visit her website, advwellness.com.